Welcome back to All Day. Rob Olson sitting in for Amy again today. This morning, U.S. Representative Kelly Morrison held a press conference in Hopkins where she spoke to small business owners about various difficulties they've experienced over the past year, a combination of tariffs, of immigration enforcement, and now the ongoing war in Iran. We brought a little bit of that to you a few minutes ago, but she joins us now live to talk about this more. Representative Morrison, thank you for taking some time to join us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin before we get to the topic of what you're doing today. Multiple sources, including Fox News, reporting that Pam Bondi is out as Attorney General, yet to be confirmed by the Justice Department or the White House, but wondering about your reaction to these reports.
Well, I think that the Pam Bondi has done a poor job of representing the interests of the American people in that position. She has used the Department of Justice as sort of a weapon of the president's. And I think probably from his perspective, she didn't manage the Epstein files situation very well. I think that her refusing to meet the eyes of victims of Jeffrey Epstein during a Judiciary Committee hearing was particularly upsetting to many of us who have advocated for justice for the victims of his crimes. So we will see who he puts in to try to replace her.
Yeah,
but I hope it's someone who takes the Department of Justice seriously and as a more independent branch of our government.
Yeah, and the reports say he's considering the director of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, to potentially take over that role. What do you think of that jump from, if that's the case, from EPA to justice?
Well, it's certainly a different skill set, ideally. Former Representative Zeldin, I know, was also a lobbyist for some of the industries that he was tasked with regulating at EPA. So I'm not really sure what he would bring to the Department of Justice, but I guess we'll learn more in the hours and days ahead.
All right. Well, turning now to the topic at hand for you today, in Hopkins, speaking with small business owners and the effects of ongoing war in Iran, about tariffs, about immigration enforcement, you say these things all combined have made it difficult for small business owners. First, explain what factors they are facing, what hardships you see them facing, and what you believe the potential solutions to those problems are.
Well, I have the privilege of serving on the Small Business Committee in the House, which I think is appropriate as a representative of the 3rd District because there's such a rich ecosystem of small businesses in the 3rd and, of course, across the state. So I think it's really my responsibility to advocate for our small businesses. And they've really just had a incredibly challenging year, beginning with the tariff policies that this administration implemented that have been, the Supreme Court deemed them illegal, of course, but they have been chaotic and unpredictable and have made it so challenging for small businesses to plan, to work their business plan, to know how much inventory to order, to figure out supply chain messes. It's really been challenging for them. And then, of course, the administration trained its eyes on Minnesota and embarked on this Operation Metro Surge that left communities across the state, and particularly in the metro area, traumatized, kept employees from going to work, hurt small businesses because they had fewer customers, and ended up deporting many people from our communities, some of whom were American citizens and some of whom were here legally. So the impacts of those two things have really left small businesses reeling, trying to get their ground, trying to stay solvent. And then the layering on of this war with Iran, it has really pushed some of them to the brink. This, of course, is causing fuel prices to rise. And most economists are predicting that the ripple effect with supply chain disruptions, with increases in costs to fertilizer, aluminum, and eventually food, it's just one more insult that our small business community is having to manage.
So what do you propose should be done to alleviate these things?
Well, I've introduced bills over the course of the past year to exempt small businesses from the tariff policies. They don't have extra money the way our big corporations do to hire lobbyists or to, invest in the president's ballroom and get exemptions in that way. And so I've tried to advocate for them in that way. I also recently introduced a bill called the Relief Act that would make sure that they were paid the refunds to the tariffs that they have paid. I welcome my colleagues across the aisle to join me in that effort and make sure that that happens. And then, of course, I think there will need to be some kind of compensation for the trauma that was inflicted on our communities with Operation Metro Surge. It was a multi-billion-dollar hit that our businesses and our community took. And many are now advocating, many of my mayors in the 3rd District also are advocating for some kind of a relief package so that we can keep those small businesses up and running. As you know, small businesses are the lifeblood of our communities, are half of the American economy. It's one of the cool things about the United States is all of the entrepreneurship and innovation that comes with our small business community. So we've got to make sure that they're healthy and are able to continue to invest and grow. And then lastly, of course, this war with Iran that no one asked for, that I think the president has done a poor job of explaining to the American people why he is even embarking on this. We need to pause that operation right now, make sure there's proper debate about it in Congress, and bring the American people along to decide together if this is the right course of action.
Yeah, and against that, too, we now have this, partial government shutdown that continues. And the Senate sent over yet another funding plan to the House, which it sounds like, and you folks are in recess, obviously, right now, but still looking at some of the potential solutions here that it sounds like House Republicans sort of just said, no, we're not going to take that up. I mean, explain to us what has happened here with this latest back and forth between Senate and House leaders.
Yeah, this has been confusing, but the Majority Leader Thune, the Republican leader of the Senate, passed a compromise deal with Senate Democrats that would have fully funded the Department of Homeland Security except for ICE and Border Patrol. We need to have a separate debate on what's happening in those agencies, but this bill would have fully funded TSA, FEMA, the Coast Guard, and then our cybersecurity agency. So they sent that bill over to the House. It would have passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, but unfortunately the extremists in the Republican caucus refused to do it. So the Speaker did not bring it up for a vote, instead passed a 60-day continuing resolution that fully funded the agency, including ICE and CBP, with no reforms or changes, a bill that has no chance of passing in the Senate. Since then, and then he recessed and sent the entire House home, which I objected to. I think is if our government is closed and unfunded, the members of Congress should stay there and continue to work until they figure it out. In the meantime, though, it sounds like Majority Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson, and perhaps with involvement with the president, we don't know, have decided actually probably the best course of action is to pass that original Senate bill, a bill that I think allowed both sides to claim victory, which isn't the worst thing. We need some of that in this hyper polarized time we're living in. It would have funded the important agencies that keep us safe, and that would have then allowed for debate about some of the overreach in ICE and CBP that we've seen across the country. So I'm hopeful he will call us back to pass that bill so that the president can sign it into law soon.
But it sounds like now the president is saying that he will issue an order to pay all DHS employees during this. And the question is, what is the authority? Where's that money come from? Do you have questions about this?
I do have questions. Congress has the authority to appropriate funds, not the president. And we need to get back to regular order and constitutional norms, following our Constitution and the way that we govern these United States of America.
All right. Well, when do you head back to D.C., and when will this debate then continue with everybody then present in the chambers?
I'm here in Minnesota. I would always prefer to be here, but I am ready to head back to D.C. at any moment. They were going to try to pass it under unanimous consent this morning, and there was speculation about it. That didn't happen. The next opportunity to do that is on Monday. I'm ready to go back at any time. I worry that it may be delayed until the end of this recess, which would be April 13th.
Which is a ways off yet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Representative Morrison, thank you for joining us today, taking time out after your news conference here, talking about the effect on small businesses of several different things here over the past year. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Representative Kelly Morrison of Minnesota.